This panel is the second panel in a series on Defenders of the Land. What we wanted to do with this panel is to have an opportunity to present voices from people who are on the ground, who are struggling against termination policy. So we want to introduce our panelists for this conversation. So my co-moderator, Crystal Sinclair, is going to read out their bios.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the honor of sitting here and introducing our panelists. I'm going to start with Darlene Necan. Darlene is a traditional hunter and trapper from the Ojibwe Nation of Saugeen Indian Tribe, number 258, which is located in Treaty 3 and 9 area in northwestern Ontario. Darlene was one of the main organizers of last year's Walk for the Equalism of Off-Reserve Members, which saw members of her community walk from their traditional territories to Ottawa, a journey which took them 28 days. Darlene is currently involved in a range of struggles in support of her people's rights for housing, traditional land, uses, and equality. Thank you, Darlene. The next one is Norman Matchewan. Norman is a youth spokesperson and band council member of the Algonquins of Barrier Lake. He has been on the front line of struggle in his community to protect the land from mining and forestry encroachment. He has been actively involved in campaigns to protect Barrier Lake's customary government and to push the Canadian and Quebec government to honor a resource co-management agreement signed with the community in 1991, called the Trilateral Agreement. He speaks his language and is actively involved in hunting and trapping in his territory. Welcome, Norman. We have Brenda Small joining us. Brenda, thank you for joining us. Brenda is, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, EU. Thank you, Brenda. From the Mocribec community with roots in Waskaganish and Chisasipi, Quebec. She has been working in education with Indigenous students and communities for 18 years in northwestern Ontario. She developed and taught in the Aboriginal Law and Advocacy program at Neganewin College at Confederation College. She is now setting up the Centre for Policy in Aboriginal Learning at Confederation College in Thunder Bay, Ontario. She is a graduate of the Faculty of Law at the University of Toronto. Brenda is the Dean of Neganewin College at Confederation College in Thunder Bay as well. She is originally from Moose Factory, a member of the non-status Mocribec Council of Crees on the western shore of James Bay. And I also have a bio here for Sheelah McLean. Welcome, Sheelah. Sheelah is a co-founder of Idle No More and an anti-racist educator and activist from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. She is currently completing a PhD in anti-colonial theory and praxis with the goal of bridging research and community activism. And I will leave it up to you to invite Michelle. And I guess we'll go into some questions. We'll start with you, Norman, and then into Darlene. Talk a bit about, you know, the struggle on your community, and if you can further explain the fight against the frontline struggle, where the encroachment of your land and mining forestry encroachments. Explain that to us, and also parts of the Trilateral Agreement. Thank you.
Norman Matchewan dus na kas mujinab ko dozba chini guys ni na ko ba linden jot he's been to the Matchewan in Asia Pacific. I'd like to say thank you to all the organizers for inviting me to speak here, you know, to share our community struggle. I'm kind of nervous. There's people back home that are watching, so I'd like to say hi. Hi to them. Hi, Mom. Yeah, hi, Mom. But yeah, so some of the struggles, I guess, that we've been faced with in the past couple of years is a lot of logging that is happening on our traditional territories. or Quebec is issuing permits without consulting our community, without consulting people from our community. And, you know, the destruction is devastating. It is devastating for our community, for our animals, for our land, our survival. You know, in my language, that is my identity. And my identity comes from my land, my language. And I'm very honored to have that teachings, you know, to carry on the language, to carry on, you know, the traditional practices of our people, our culture. You know, but now you see all this devastation, and you know, we've always believed in coexistence back home. We always believed, you know, to co-manage our territory within the spirit of the Trilateral Agreement. And the governments, you know, they signed a legal document. Quebec and Canada signed a legal document with our community, and they have not respected what was in the agreements. And there was recommendations that came out of the agreement for, you know, for hydro hookup to our community, co-management of our traditional territory, for our people to have a say on what goes on in our territory. You know, there was a recommendation for resource revenue sharing, you know, because right now, Quebec government is making over $100 million a year off our lands, and our community does not see anything, and yet we're the ones that continue to live in poverty. You know, the governments have tried everything to undermine what they have signed with our community. They have, you know, they have overthrown our traditional, our customs, our customary governance. You know, I did not accept that I was elected leader for my community. You know, I fought against the Indian Act, you know, but there's people that were still interested in it, I guess. You know, there's a lot of people on Abandas, and I'm sure most of the Indigenous people here will know what I'm talking about, that on the Indian Act registry list, half of the people we don't even know who are those people. And you know, there was a lot of threat for these people negotiating with Quebec and Canada, you know, over you know, the community's interest was at risk, and that we couldn't accept. And that's when the community decided, after 2 years of battling the Indian Act system, we had to come to a meeting and decide, you know, what do we boycott this more, or do we put ourselves at risk, put our future generations at risk, or take action. Sorry. But right now, that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to let my elder Michelle speak about it more, because I'm kind of sick right now.
Big Rex, maganda siya kung magsasabat mo kayo doon. Ay sa katugan din bigwak, ay sa kadoktak, pwede ka sort of back. Kaya isa na kadamagwak, hanggang sa siya mananag, isang siya mananag, isabat sa tuak, dos ka niya mananag ko siya kita naman ng madsiyos. So So first I'd like to thank everyone for inviting us to share our struggle, our history, and try to preserve what our ancestors, our elders have given us for the sake of our new generation to rely on in overcoming their struggle and preserving their identity. First, I'd like to say that I stopped hiding day one when I was sent to residential school. I struggled emotionally to overcome the sexual abuse that I went through. It was a very difficult time for me during my younger days. And how I overcome this painful experience is reconnecting myself to the land. The time I was at residential schools, I had to go back to the land to get the strength with the support of my older brother. And this is how I survived. So many times I thought of suicidal, but it's my connection with the land, with the Great Spirit. By connecting myself to significant sites that I spent time with my grandfather, that's what gave me strength. And throughout the years, that's what kept me alive. And to share this knowledge with you, the experience that the land is very important for us, regardless how we suffered in our lifetime. This is what we have used to be able to leave to our next generation their identity, to value their land, their culture, their language, and to share this knowledge and hopefully to marry it with the scientific knowledge so that we can coexist. So we did have the elders identified, participated in mapping out the areas that is very crucial for the survival of our community. We have mapped out all the Algonquin place names within our traditional territory, our land use, and all the important things that we need for our identity to survive. Language, our connection with the land. Those have been identified. This is what resulted in the trilateral agreement and the recommendation that came out of it to negotiate some kind of a co-management, which we believed in, our ancestors believed in as well. They left us with a tool for our children to rely on to sustain their identity and language. But unfortunately, the provincial government are ignoring these recommendations. And now we are facing extinguishment of our identity because they are coming with other development within our traditional territory, such as mining exploration and exploitation. All the Algonquin words that our ancestors have left us throughout our traditional territory will be meaningless because those Algonquin words will be buried by the debris of the mining exploitation, which for us, as our community elders, we see our children suffering even much greater. Our children will not have the same opportunity that I had when I was going through healing after the residential school abuse, sexual abuse that I went through. The land helped me, supported me, along with my family. So those are the struggle that we have going through. They're planning to do a mining exploration approximately 80 kilometers long and 5 kilometers in the heart of our traditional territory, which will affect the majority of our family, of our community. That's the struggle we are faced with. And for us as elders, we always feel that if we cannot stop or have control over the territory that our ancestors have given us, there's always that guilt that we feel every day, failing our younger generation. Our youth are participating in this march. They're going to be arriving in Ottawa within the next few days. They're fighting for a cause, protection of the environment, water, and their identity. There's 45 of our youths that are taking part of this struggle. So that's the hardship that we are going through, because the federal nor the provincial government are very disrespectful to our community. We bet.
Thank you so much to Michelle and Norman for your words. And I know that you would probably support asking everyone here to send their prayers to be with the Cree walkers who have been joined with so many other youth from different communities, including, as Michelle said, there's 45 youth walkers from Barrier Lake who joined the Nishu.
300.
There's 300 in total now who will be arriving in Ottawa tomorrow. Darlene, I know that you're a traditional hunter and a trapper in your territory, just as Norman is, and Norman and Michelle mentioned that there's forestry on their territory. That's being done by Resolute Forest Products, who I know are also extracting forest from your land. I wonder if you could talk about the relationship between your relationship to the land, what's happening on it, and your identity as Norman did.
Oh, you just only want me to talk about forestry and that's it?
No, you can actually talk about whatever you want. I was just making the link that the same forestry company was on both of your territories.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, hello everybody. My name is Darlene Necan of the Ojibwe Nation of Saugeen Indian Tribe number 258. I live in our traditional territories of Treaty 3 and Treaty 9 of the northwestern of Ontario. And there's a few women from my reserve up here as my supporters. They came with me. I'm a grassroots activist who believes in the justice and the wellness of humankind and our environment issues. We all have to protect. So we all know that as peoples, that we need water to survive in every way. You need water. That's just plain bottom line on it. Without water, our waters get poisoned. We might as well say goodbye to all of each other. That's the way I see it. But anyways, that's the way I see it as a grassroots activist protecting the land and all that. And yeah, I'm a hunter too. I kill a lot of partridges. But not really. I never got really into moose hunting right now, but my mom was a great moose hunter. She was a residential school survivor, but sadly she passed away on the 5th of March, and she showed me a lot. My kokum and my mom, they're my queens in the north. They're the ones that taught me everything, how to survive, and to be able to survive in the bush. They taught me everything that I need to know there. Like, I know how to survive in the city too, and that's to be mean. But in the bush, you're more into yourself, you're more connected with the forest, because the forest is alive. And it is alive. I would never lie anything about it like that. And I'm just kind of sad because of my mom. She was a residential school survivor, and she taught us a lot. She explained to us what happened to her, and that's why I know and I believe our elders, 2 generations behind, the older ones, they went through a hard time. They literally got sexually abused, and that's what my mom told us too before all this residential school thing came out. She told us her story, what she went through. To this day, it's as if they don't believe her story. It's just that she doesn't know how to act. She's never took acting lessons in her life, but they wanted her to act in a certain way so she could qualify for this money. She was promised $98,000 way at the beginning of this so-called IEP process. You know, they got their roster of lawyers, they got their roster of doctors. You know, it was, to me, the way I look at it was stupid on how it was handled. It's too many involved, and they were self-paying themselves as well. And, you know, the sad thing is when my mom was promised $98,000, and the lawyers get 15% automatic, they're automatically paid for each person. So you add that up, like, you know, and then my mom only gets this one-time little wee thing. Did she get her $98,000? She didn't. She only got $36,000 for all her hardship, all her abuse, the whippings, the scars that are on her body. She was only worth $36,000 for telling the truth. You know, and that's sad, and I'm still frustrated about that because I'm not gonna let it go till I can find some kind of closure on that. And my sister's going through the same thing today too, how the lawyers stall, this stalling game. It's sickening how it's, you know, these professionals who go to school for this and that, you know, it's all about money. It's not really about humanity. You know, everybody forgets their moral upbringing. I don't know where maybe everybody drives too fast in this city. I don't know. But anyways, you know, don't take the time and really think and observe themselves. That's what I see. That's why I like it out in the bush. When I'm yelled at in a racist slur, "Go home, you dirty Indian." Please tell me that again, I will. That's how I do it now. I don't turn around and fight back like I used to, because I used to get in trouble, not them. Cops would come after me. So, you know, I learned all that in the street life. And but right now, I'm going to try to make it fast, but I had to, because I respect, you know. My mom tried the same thing, like suicide. We had to stop her. And yeah, that's hard. And we're not, you know, we're not here to want to get pity. We're not here to get money. We're not here. We just want to be heard and understood, and how work together, how to make it better for everybody. My struggle right now with the people, with our reserve, is, oh boy, this is so hard and complicated. I don't really have the time to explain everything in detail. But we're under a custom and usage convention under treaty, and our chief is a customary chief with hereditary laws, so he's in there for life. We're not under the other reserves where they get 3, 4, 5-year elections. We're not in that way. We're under land code. And so with us, our leadership, he's my cousin, okay? That's my blood. But I see it different as to standing up against my own blood to justify what he's doing wrong to the people. He does not listen to his people, and he doesn't help his people. And that's why we step out like this and fight. And the thing is, I don't want to be undermined or used as a pawn to get after our treaties. We're under this convention, and I uphold our treaties. I believe in them. Our convention is good. Wrong leaders in there. So right now, we're trying to remove our leadership. That's the struggle that we're under. And a couple years back, we built our elder a house because our chief refused to help her, and he didn't want nothing to do with her because she's an off-reserve member, because they have to deal with the inn. The off-reserve people, automatically they fall under the welfare system, and the welfare system to me is almost like the Indian Act. They keep you down. And that's how I see the welfare system. Because a lot of us in the cities in Thunder Bay, we sleep on the floors. We rent slum houses, apartments. And our checks are, their rent is way higher than our checks. So how do you figure, to live like that? And then when you move to a different place, automatically landlord talks to landlord, automatically your name is bad. So it's always repetitive like that to keep the Indian low in the city. That's how we observe it. And so anyways, we built this elder lady a house, and to wake up our chief to what he's doing, we figure if we can do it by example and work together with no money. We didn't have money when we started building this lady a house. Everything we just had to kind of pull together out of our own little people off the reserve. So that was done. And then we felt like we weren't satisfied enough with the house because we were still homeless. We're still fighting for houses. And our chief he doesn't have to come to the table if he doesn't want to, because that's how our convention is written. And so anyway, the next thing we did was we did a walk to Ottawa last August for off-reservation members that need houses. So that's what we did. We walked right from our reserve right to Ottawa last year. And when we left our reserve, our chief, the administrator, and the chief's kids, they really went against us. They really put us down when we started our walk. And I understand why, because we're taking their bread and butter away as well. And we're going to go and expose our chief now as to what's happening in our reserve, because all these years back we tried to talk to them, write letters, pleaded with them. We did everything for them to acknowledge us, but they didn't. They just told us no, 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 no. Everything we said was no. So that's why we did our walk to Ottawa, and we made it there in 28 days. And this walk was like a spiritual walk. I believe in my traditions, and there was stuff that we saw, and there was like things that happened. I won't go into detail on that either. And but it was good. It was meant to happen. And when we got to Ottawa, we didn't have to make appointments to get into Parliament or that other place beside it, Justice Building and the House of Commons and all that. So we were led right in because we came out honestly and we talked to them right to their face what we're doing this and why we're doing this walk for. Yeah, we yeah, and so anyway, that was the walk to Ottawa, and what was that again? Oh, okay, well, with our trap line right now, oh boy, this is a mess. I don't even know where to begin with this. My family's trap line got clear-cutted. And like it's been going on for years. That's why it's so hard to bundle it up into one little thing right now. But what happened to me was because of this trap line, I don't know if they found anything. It's because it was hard for me to get to the trap line because our distances, traveling distances where I live, like you got to drive an hour right straight through bush, you got to drive another hour, another bush, so it's hard. And when you're on welfare, you don't got the money to gas up somebody and take you. You got to pretty well walk or else you got to hitchhike. So that's how we live up there. It's really hard. It's not easy, and I'm not making this up either. If somebody don't believe me, come with me. And but anyways, our trap line, I ended up losing my license over it because I don't really know, like the governments, how they work on top of you. Like with me, I'm a nobody, okay? I'm just a native woman, right? Who has no dollar signs on my forehead, so I'm very unbelievable. So, and the governments, they work with each other on top over my head. My reserve is a government. The chief is our government, okay? So that's how they work, government to government. So like when we wrote to federal and provincial governments, they didn't really take me serious. They just wrote me base letters, oh, talk to your chief. Because they already talked to the chief already. Like they were just doing these stalling games and, you know, go away, you know, like that, eh? That's how I felt, and probably what I'm going through. And, but anyways, our trap line, my tent got burnt down. We built another tent, because when we go in the bush, we make sure we don't leave the land in messy style. We're always very clean people in the bush. We don't leave garbage laying around and all that. We're very clean in the bush, out of respect. And my tent got knocked down again, a second one. And then I got charged for depositing garbage on Crown land. And that's what happened, and I'm thinking, what? You know, I was so, it's hard. I was so disappointed in how the provincial government would literally say that. You know, like you're thinking, what? You guys work way up here and you guys are going to say stuff like this? You know, and I couldn't believe it. Eh? It's very, I don't know. I always thought it happened in the movies. But yeah, but it happens in real life. Government to government. You're set up, you're put down, you're molded the way they want you to be. And yeah, so anyways, that's what the trap line and the walk. Right now, we're in this fight with our chief to come to the table and say, work with us, or else right now, I'm going to go to Ottawa and do other legal matters to get equality on the reserve for the rest of the Saugeen people, like the ones that want homes, the young ones with the babies now, like they need a house. So why not, you know, get our houses from the band? So we're working on that right now, but we're not going to work with the chief. We're not good, because he's working with his lawyer. You know, our chief runs to the white man. He's going to run to the queen, and he runs to his lawyer. Yeah, that's the way it's happening. So we're saying, how come he doesn't run to us? So what happened in turn was the young ones started noticing what's happening. So the young ones and some older people, they came to me and they said, can you speak for us? I said, no. They said, no, can you speak for us? You know, and I finally said, yeah, you know what, I will. And besides, I was elected through a circle to speak as well. About a year after the suicide of my son, I got elected to be a spokesperson, and it's hard. But I had to do it for the young ones. That's why I stood up the way I did. And, yeah.
You have that mic. I'm just taking this one.
Oh, done? No,
Oh, I thought you were taking it away from me.
It's just an echo from the two mics.
Yeah, and but anyways, okay, I'll try to hurry up here. And Idle No More, we're in support of Idle No More too. We've already seen these problems way before the actual movement started, and but we sat in the bush because because we're in the bush, like we don't got internet, we don't got phones, so we're kind of like lost in the bush as to knowing what's happening out in the general public. That's where we're kind of slow in catching up to what's happening. Like, you know, I was very happy when I read about the people that are walking, like, oh, wow, power to the man. You know, because it is hard when you walk, but when you do a walk too, if you do it from the heart, you learn a lot. Yeah, because you're walking, and you're walking with nature. You see things differently, you know. We saw a lot of things and they were good. Not like the fancy cars, you nice fancy car, and you whip by and you don't see nothing. All you see is a dash and that's it. Huh? Yeah. So there's two different ways of life there. And I don't know more, yeah. We did our own, and Ignace, there was 4 of us women and 2 dogs and 2 cops. And and that was it, in front of the LCBO building. Yeah, so that's what happened, and now, okay, this will probably be one of the last times I'll be coming out here for a while. I'm thinking that for the next 2 years I won't be around here, because I met a lot of good people. Like, there is a lot of good people, and they did come and help us, the ILPS people. They helped us a lot, and they're understanding where we're coming from. So we're kind of like working with them into understanding and working together as non-Native and Native. Okay, that's how we're trying, yeah. So what we're going to do in this coming spring, and I'm kind of hoping the snow will go down, up in the Ignace, the snow is about this high. When you come here, like, there's nothing, So, but anyways, for the next 2 years and in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be moving back up north. I got a tent by donations from the ILPS, which was good. So I'm going to get on my feet again, and we're going to start building our own cabins for now, right on the trap line. So that's what we're going to do. And hopefully we get a lot of help, and we're asking for donations, you know, like windows, doors. Like, we're not fussy. We don't want nothing new. We just want things that are useful and worth using. So we're asking for that, and like, we're asking for, if you got time, come and help. Like, the more hands we have, the better. I got a nice beach on the trap line where everybody can go and lay around. But anyways, like, that's the plans that we're going to do. And on the other hand, I'm still going to pursue about our chief and getting justification for our people, the youth that I'm leading. Yeah, right now the youth are starting to wake up in our area. So, and I'm very proud, because before then they didn't care, because they didn't have nothing to look forward to. Now this kind of gives them a little reason, little baby step. That's all we got. Yeah, we got you.
Thank you so much, Darlene, for your words. I want to turn now to Brenda Small to talk about some of her work with youth in Thunder Bay. She's been doing, her work is really intervening with youth through education, and I'm sure she can speak to youth who are coming from community and the kind of work she's doing to try to prepare them for the world that you're describing.
Thank you. First off, I want to share with folks a photograph of my grandparents. I coincidentally have this photo because Don gave it to me today. And what it is my paternal grandparents, when they first started to settle in this factory, at this factory island. So maybe you can help me hold it on this side. So, no, hold it on your side. Thank you. This is a photograph. This is a photograph of my father's parents outside a tent that they made out of canvas on the shore of the Moose River at Moose Factory Island. And my grandfather is making snowshoes, as you can see. And his name was Philip Kapshizit. Kapshizit is my family name, my father's name, and my late brother Randy Kapshizit was friends with some of the organizers here today, so I want to acknowledge Randy today and all of his friends. Miigwech. And my grandmother is standing over here with an all-knowing, all-powerful, quiet smile. And her name was Annie Vishchi. And this little guy here with the confident stance is my father, who's now 78 years old. And his name is James, but in Cree, you make it cute and you say Jameshy. So he's cute then, and he's still cute. So I wanted to share this with you so that you would know that my brother and I, the only two children that my father and mother had, my mother's name was Lillian Eiserhoff, and she was from northern Quebec. She was born in a place called Chisasibi. And my father was born at Moose Factory, although we are not considered members of the Moose Cree First Nation. Moose Quebec is a community that lives outside the confines of the Indian Act and has been a self-determining community exercising its own economic and political autonomy for a number of years. So, I just wanted you to know we're one generation removed from the land. Thank you. So, when you're that close to the land, no matter where you live and work, your memory or your consciousness of where you come from is quite immediate. It is not something that happened to other people or previous generations. It's in fact something that is very, very close. And although I live in the city of Thunder Bay and previously lived in the city of Toronto, I have had this great sense of affinity for the land and know that an understanding and a respect and a responsibility to the land and the natural environment is very much the reason why we're put here. We are here because of those responsibilities and nothing more than that. So in terms of what we're talking about today, when Sherry asked how I could share the story of what we're doing in Northwestern Ontario and Thunder Bay, it's another coincidence that I've met a former student, Jerry, who's in the back, who's actually accompanying her colleague from Ignace, Ontario today. And when I say a former student, when I moved to Thunder Bay in 1994, a group of us created a program called the Aboriginal Law and Advocacy Program. And it's a college diploma program that really tries to take the privilege away from legal and political discourse. You don't have to go to law school to access the vocabulary, the language, the concept, or the conversation. So we're trying to say, let's look at law, history, politics, economics. Let's look at Indigenous thought, Indigenous worldviews, Indigenous principles of leadership and governance, and let's make that a much more accessible education or learning experience. So we've been in place since 1995 at a place called Negan College, which is part of Confederation College, ironically, in Thunder Bay, Ontario. So in doing this work, what we're trying to say is that we need to make a contribution to a public discourse in the area of education and learning. Very often we find that in the public education system, there's a clear absence of the Indigenous point of view. Naturally, we know that the schools and the institutions are instruments of oppression. I work there. We also know that we're in a position to actually try to build a new discourse through education and learning. There are many colleagues who work in universities and colleges that are Indigenous who are bringing their experiences and their stories into those circles. Need some water. So one of the things that I think about when I think about idle war and these kinds of public conversations, I think that this is really a conversation about Canada. This is not a conversation that is merely one-sided or from the perspective of Indigenous peoples. This is a conversation that Canada has to recognize itself, doesn't know itself, needs to look in the mirror and understand what it is, what it has become, and what its premise is. So many times, when one looks at the news or the public discussions about idle no more or Indigenous sovereignty or Indigenous political movements,
the spotlight or the camera is pointed in the wrong direction. It's pointed at us. Really, it needs to be pointed on Canadian governments. It needs to be pointed at Canadians. The fortunate thing is that there are folks who are non-Indigenous, who are Canadian, who recognize that reality. This is one such person. And what we're talking about now in places like this is the need for us to open the doors, talk about this in a very open way, in a very frank and respectful way, because its time is way overdue. One of the things that we're talking about where I work is how do you make sure that anyone who goes to an Ontario college where I work, no matter what program they choose, they graduate with an infusion and an introduction and an integration of Indigenous studies content across the board. That's what we're doing. So if you take nursing, you need to understand something about Indigenous health issues. You need to be a worker, a nurse, who understands who your community is. You need to be able to work in Northwestern Ontario with Indigenous people. You need to understand health factors. You need to understand the WHO and all the provisions around Aboriginal or Indigenous health issues and concerns. If you're taking business, you need to understand what that means in terms of development. What does that mean in terms of taxation? These are the issues that we want all of the learners who come to college to know about. It's not useful to have a one-sided education. It's not useful to only learn what the state wants you to learn. It's important to introduce new subject matter and historic subject matter that is based on truth and realities. So what we're trying to do across the Ontario College system actually is a coalition called the Indigenous Peoples Education Circle, is to make sure that all Ontario colleges awaken to these responsibilities. We're also trying to make sure and working with university folks that our colleagues there are doing the same thing. We actually had a working relationship with George Brown College around the Assaulted Women and Children's Counselor Advocate Program. And we had our colleague here, Gloria, actually teach a group of women in Northwestern Ontario through an auspices of our partnership with George Brown and Women College. So there's all of this on the ground work that's being done in the area of education that people don't really know about, and people don't really understand or appreciate. But I know that you will, and that you will do whatever you can to make sure that this grows and that we have support in an ongoing way to do this work. It's really important that I think when we talk about community organizing and advocacy, that people recognize that we are the best tools with which to do this work. We don't need to pay other people to do this work for us. We don't need to look for other people's expertise, that in fact we have these abilities, these capacities, and this wisdom that's inherent in our own experience. It's part of our DNA. It's what makes us who we are as Indigenous peoples. And that is really what we want to impart, not only in the Academy, but in communities in which we're situated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda. We're getting, first of all, we got a shout out from Italy. Someone in Italy wanted to express their support for this gathering, and we've had almost 1,000 views now. One of the questions that has come in through the online forum is, how can non-Indigenous allies best support the movement and the struggle of Aboriginal peoples? And I can't think of a better person to answer that in this context than Sheelah McLean, who's one of the non-Indigenous founders of Idle No More. Idle No More, as I mentioned in the last panel, has formed a partnership with Defenders of the Land, which is a national grassroots Indigenous network of land defenders, to call for a summer of protest, a summer of sovereignty, for people to assert their rights in coordinated direct action. So I wanted to ask Sheelah if she would speak to the statement or to her work as an ally for Indigenous people, and whatever else you want to talk about in response to people on the panel.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd just like to thank everyone for inviting me, and I'm so honored to be here. And I also want to give recognition to my teachers, in particular my supervisor and one of my best friends, Brenda S, who is a scholar and an activist and has been working her whole life to resist colonial oppression. And so she's an anti-racist, anti-colonial scholar who has taught many people in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, how to resist in different spaces. And so one of the things I've done in Saskatoon and across Saskatchewan is use the education that I've had to try to work with ally groups in looking at how we can resist ongoing colonization. I thought I'd start by talking a little bit about Idle No More and the organizing that's going on in the upcoming spring and summer, and then talk a little bit about allyship and what that might mean for us. Idle No More started, most of you know, at the beginning of November, and I was contacted by Sheelah McLean to come into a Facebook chat with Nina Wilson and Jess Gordon and start to plan. And one of the reasons that they invited me is because they knew that I was doing activist work in the city already, and that I had planned some other rallies, and that I worked on anti-colonial scholarship. And so our first rally happened at Station 20 West on November 10th. And our plan was to educate as many people as we possibly could about the impending bills. And I can tell you that the name Idle No More came from Jess Gordon, and she was really talking about the four of us acting out against these particular bills. And so we do want to honor the activist work that has gone on for generations in Canada and, of course, globally. And that Idle No More really was a very personal journey for us initially in terms of coming together and trying to educate as many people as we could about how dangerous these bills actually were. And so we had our first rally at Station 20 West, we had petitions ready, and then we moved to another small city, Prince Albert, and then North Battleford the next weekend. And then we went on to other spaces, Regina, and it went into Edmonton by the end of November. And we had planned a National Day of Action for December 10th. And I can tell you how excited we were when we started to see the momentum build, because so many people were joining our Facebook page and contacting us directly and asking us how they could, what they could do, and how they could support the struggle that we were in. So, of course, we were spreading petitions around. We were telling them about our rallies and our teach-ins and how we were doing what we were doing. And we started to collect a group of Indigenous women, of leaders throughout the communities who said they wanted to work with us. And so really behind the scenes, what many people don't know is that every single day we are talking and working through Skype, through Facebook, through telephone calls and emails to determine how we can possibly move forward on what's happening in the context of Canada right now. So it's invisible work. And many people are gauging Idle No More right now by the corporate media. And actually that is not a good gauge for what's happening at all. What's really happening is happening behind the scenes, and there are so many teach-ins and rallies that are happening across this country. They send us the photographs. They send us the information. They ask us for ongoing support. And it's just amazing, and we are amazed every single day. And we did want to have this discussion with Canadians, and that was, of course, a goal. But we didn't expect it to become an international movement within a month. And that's, of course, what happened. And one of the reasons that happened is because the impact of colonialism in Canada, of course, is a global story. And the impact on Indigenous peoples and their inherent territories is happening all over the world right now as globalization occurs. So as capitalism is globalized, you see that these powers and these ideologies are actually occurring globally. And so it's not a surprise that this is not just our story here in Canada, but that many Indigenous people are relating to this story. And of course, many ally groups are trying to fight the ongoing social justice issues and the ongoing environmental issues as well. So once we knew that this was going to be something that was much bigger than we had originally expected. We started to think about organizing chapters across Canada, and so we do have lead organizers across the country that are working very hard every day, volunteering to push the movement forward and thinking about how to maintain it as a grassroots movement, and also thinking about what are our goals. And one of the things that we've been very lucky is to have so many groups contacting us and asking us how they can support our work. Because, of course, as a grassroots movement, some of the things that we're coming up against are new to us. And so we've had experts across the field, and Defenders of the Land are a perfect example of that, who have come to us and said, not only can we work together, but we can provide our experience and our expertise in dealing with these issues as well. So I can tell you that we have learned so much in the last 4 months, and particularly I have learned so much about what it means to continue to work as an ally against the oppression of colonization and the continued violence and attacks towards Indigenous communities and their lands. And so I think it's really important for us to talk about spring and summer and talk about the two goals of I Don't Know More. Our original plan was to really focus on self-determination for Indigenous communities and sustainability. Right now we have a system where people are living and consuming unlimited amounts of resources on a finite or limited planet. And so we know that this is a crisis, and we think about how can we start to shift the consciousness of not just Canadians, but really globally, shift the consciousness of people to understand that we're working with limited resources, and the lunacy of the idea that we can continue with these practices. This is a very short-term plan. This is a short-term economic plan. And of course, we have to ask ourselves who benefits from this plan. One of the things that we'd like to do for spring and summer is start to look at education, which is one of our key goals to our campaign, and also direct strategic nonviolent action. And of course, that direct strategic nonviolent action has been happening for centuries, long before I Don't Know More came along. But I Don't Know More is inviting people to join in on that, so that everyone is protecting the land and water, and that everyone in Canada stands up to protect our communities from the ongoing inequality and injustice that's happening for everyone. I was thinking about, this morning, people were talking about the role of writers and poets and artists in the movement, and I do believe that they've played a very powerful and important role. That we have to remember that the storying of Canada really does infuse us with a very specific identity. That story is so powerful that, as has been mentioned here, it's told through all of our institutions, primarily education and our media institutions, but also through government, through our justice institutions. But our institutions have a really powerful story of Canada. And you can stop any Canadian and ask them, what is the Canadian identity? What do you think it means to be Canadian? And the majority of Canadians, I believe, from my research, will tell you that Canada is a country of democracy, that Canada is a country of peacekeeping, that Canada is a country of tolerance, that there is no racism in Canada, that Canada is a multicultural country that celebrates difference. And of course, this identity is so strong that it infuses Canadians with a sense of goodness and innocence that denies the history of violence in this country and denies the truth of colonization. That it's so powerful because the other parts of what it means to be Canadian are completely silenced. And so this identity construction also leads a lot of immigrants to come to Canada hoping that that story is true. And they also are infused with this identity very quickly as they come into Canada. If you start to speak to people that come to Canada, they do believe that in that story. And so what artists and writers and poets do, and filmmakers, and I mean I could go on, is they disrupt that story. Is that they tell the truth of our Canadian identity and how important that is for allies, for white settlers like myself, to know the truth of our country and to understand that identity and that how we're positioned in that and how it means that you cannot be neutral neutral in the system. There is no such thing as being neutral in the system. That if you're not fighting for social justice and the environment right now as we speak, that you are actually choosing to support violence and injustice towards communities and towards the land. That is your choice. And so restoring in Canada is so powerful because these ideologies actually create the policies and practices that we're all talking about today. And they do create the material consequences. And I think a lot about and have studied, how is it that settler Canadians can deny the ongoing violence, not only just deny our history that is not taught in our schools, but also deny the ongoing violence. And of course, it's because they have bought into this story of Canadian identity, this story of goodness and innocence that is so powerful that they can become completely blind to what's actually happening, which is why education is so key. And how do Canadians come to understand inequality, the inequality that Arthur talked about this afternoon, when he said, how is it that settlers can come into Canada and benefit so that there's gross inequalities here in Canada and not see the impoverishment of Indigenous peoples based on that identity. And that identity comes very much so from private ownership of land, and also from accumulation. So really, when you look at, and I've thought a lot about what is the Canadian identity? If it's not about multiculturalism and democracy and peacekeeping, what is it? And I look at just a group of teenagers and how heavily they're targeted in mainstream media into consumerism. And that accumulation in consumerism is actually what often gives people status. And of course, we've had a long history of white settler Canadians having access to that accumulation and having access to that consumerism. So the real Canadian identity is one of consumption, a constant consumption. And so this is where I think we need to shift in consciousness about the ability of settler Canadians to shift their identity away from consumption and accumulation into something of equity, into supporting Indigenous rights, Indigenous self-determination, and in acknowledging that this is Indigenous land and resources, in being able to also fight the constant racism and sexism and homophobia that divides our communities, and those divisions are purposeful, and not teaching about these things in our communities, in our schools, in our mass media. It is purposeful because it allows and maintains the system to stay in place. And so it's so important to work across these differences. It's not easy. There are going to be tensions, and we know that. These tensions have been created through inequitable policies and practices that have been happening for hundreds of years. But right now, we are in a crisis situation where we have to talk about how can we work across these differences, what are some of our common goals. And I believe that what we have to come to grips with as Canadians is that this movement, that's an Indigenous-led movement, is the history of this country. That is the history of a nation-to-nation relationship. And settlers have to find their role in supporting that and in pressuring this government, and not just this government, but these multinational corporations that are really running this government and making decisions for this government. Because, a lot of Canadians won't even talk about the fact that Stephen Harper is an oil executive. His role in this has been very clear from the beginning, and I believe that the plan that they have now is a plan that has been long-standing, that he had a plan to turn Canada into a resource extraction state. And so, of course, we see that Indigenous communities are being hit first, and this is why Indigenous communities and their rights and their sovereignty are being attacked right now, is so that the environment can be attacked. And the government think that this is legitimate, and of course it's all illegal, it's all legitimate, illegitimate. And so that's what Canadians have to stand up against. And I think, obviously, people have talked about the fact that we need to have healthy food, we need to have land that we can live on, we need to have clean water and clean air. All of us need that, and so working together for that, I think, is essential at this time. But also, we have to, as allies, think about what does it mean to be an ally at this time. And particularly allies that have benefited from this system and continue to benefit from this ongoing colonization and this ongoing violence. And I would say that one of the things that we can do is use everything we have to pressure this government to do exactly what Arthur and Russell talked about today, which is to support the United Nations Declaration of Rights on Indigenous People, that has to be in place, that we have to look at honoring the treaties and that treaty relationship, and that we have to come to acknowledge that this is Indigenous land and these are Indigenous resources. And so how can we coexist with that at the center of all of our discussions and our realization of what it means to be Canadian. So those are the most important things I think we need to start to come to grips with as Canadians. And I think what Idaho has done is brought that to the table and asked Canadians to start questioning what their identity is and where they sit in this struggle.
Michelle Testy from Barrie Lake.
Well, for my community, as I mentioned, we've been impacted by the forestry company Resolute, and presently they are taking the community to court, to prevent, blocking them from forestry activities. So they will also, which means they will destroy all the community concerns in terms of significant sites, and and these experiences that the community has went through, it has put a wedge on our family values, as well as parent and their children's relationship, because our children will ask in the future, why did you identify those sites and why didn't you protect them? Because the provincial government did not respect the agreement that they have with our community. So that's the struggle, the daily concerns that we have going through as a community. And then in terms of the mining exploration that's going to be taking place in our area, territory, they're going to be doing a mining exploration on the headwater of the Ottawa River. Our community there, again, have identified sturgeon spawning sites, several of them, and then with the hope that they're going to be protected. But at the same time, the provincial government will be issuing permit to these mining companies, totally ignoring our use of that area, because we are the only permanent residents within that area. They have not consulted our community. We have survived within that area for many years, before Quebec was born. And we have retained our language. I speak my mother tongue. I communicate and speak English. Je parle aussi la langue de la belle province de Québec, qui clame être une société distincte. Meaning, I speak their language, French, and I communicate in French, and I'm also claiming that they are a distinct society. All we want, I've adapted myself, our community, all we want is coexistence, because coexistence means respect. So hopefully we educate the shareholders of Copper One who will be doing exploration within our territory, because they're going to be destroying our identity within the so-called territory claimed by the Visiting Society. You know, it's shameful, but that's what we are faced with. So hopefully hopefully you will send a message to the provincial government to respect and honor the word and the agreement that they've signed with our community. Thank
you, Michelle. And for people who want to get involved and support communities like Barrier Lake who are involved in struggle against the extractive industries, you can go to barrierlakesolidarity.org and sign up for our mailing list and find out ways where you can actually get involved and support communities. And on that tip, I just wanted to give the mic to Sheelah for a minute to see if she'll tell people some specifics about the Sovereignty Spring and Sovereignty Summer that I Don't Know More and Defenders has been planning, in the sense of dates and actions planned, so that people can also, part of the idea of getting everyone together here and asking people to register is to keep people informed about ways that they can support communities that are in struggle, especially if people are escalating tactics. They'll need support from non-Indigenous people and urban allies more than ever.
Oh, you have a mic.
Well, many of you know that we just had 3 days, March 20th, 21st, and 22nd, where we had I Don't Know More actions across Canada, and there were ally groups that were working with us on that. April 22nd is Earth Day, and it's going to be a day for I Don't Know More and Lead Now and environmental groups to work together on a larger action in terms of both working up towards education, so having teach-ins and rallies and educating people using social media about the issues that we're working on right now, and then using April 22nd to actually have a day of action. We also are looking at building solidarity with groups that can help us to build resources, educational resources. So we're looking at working with unions and, as I said, other environmental groups on moving forward. We're also looking at a grassroots forum that's coming up, and we're hoping that it's going to be in Saskatoon, but we're talking about the idea of possibly having them in different communities. Having opportunities to come together and talk about what the next actions are. And June 21st is another day that came up as a possible day of action. And of course, one of the things we want to do is target places like Parliament Hill to keep the pressure on government and keep the pressure on industry in terms of what's happening. Now, tomorrow I'm going to be talking to the Canadian Labour of Congress, and one of the things I'm going to invite them to do is to support us in terms of when we call out for a day of action, that they actually hit the streets with us. And so there will be strikes going on, and that there will be more pressure on government. One of the concerns that they have, of course, is attacks on their rights as unions, their collective rights as unions, and they feel this government is attacking that, and they want to push back as well. And so they want to work with I Don't Know More on stopping this government from, you know, the constant attacks on collective rights. And so I think that exactly as Sherry has said, that one of the things we need to be aware of as Canadians is really educate ourselves on the different spaces in Canada where communities are being attacked right now. So in other words, what's happening in the different communities across Canada, who is trying to protect their land, and how can we support them. So one of the ways we can support them often is through raising funds to help the community to, you know, continue their camps throughout the spring and summer. Another way is, of course, to educate our communities about what's happening in that space. And so what mining companies are trying to go in, and how can we pressure them to stay out of those specific places, and pressure our government to have limits on what these multinational corporations can do in our country. And of course, another thing we can do is actually be there and work with communities. And so what we're hoping to do is continue to use our website, idlemore.ca, and to use social media to alert Canadians that are working with Idle No More and wanting to be allies about the upcoming spring and summer actions, to let people know what communities need support and how they can support. And so those are some of the things that we know are happening in the next few months. And so really the goal is to escalate the pressure on the government and on these corporations. And we need to continue to do that, and everything you do is going to be helpful. Anything you do, the more people that we get involved, the more powerful this movement is going to be. So I invite you to, people often ask, like, well, what can I do? Or they'll email us and say, start in your own community. Start teach-ins there. Start to have rallies there. That's really what we need, is we need people to take leadership on this, rather than, wait. We need people to take leadership on this and start to act in their own communities. And that is going to support Idle No More. The more that we have people taking leadership on this, the bigger that Idle No More is going to get. And I can tell you that the ally groups that are working with us right now continue to grow. So much so that we don't even have the volunteer capacity right now to work with the groups outside of Canada that are inviting us to work with them. Sylvia has gone to talk to the United Nations, and we're asking countries outside to start to pressure our government as well. And so that's some work that we're working on, but of course we need to continue that work.
We're really down to the wire here. We want to give people an opportunity. Yeah, I was going to ask Brenda and Darlene if they wanted to offer some final reflections and to talk about ways of moving forward within their own work. And then we might have time for one or two questions. But we really want to make sure people have a full hour for dinner so they don't come in late for the final Muskrat sponsored panel in the evening with Naomi Klein and Art Manuel and others.
So, Brenda, go ahead.
I just wanted to share some news about the longest walk for Return to Alcatraz, which is being organized for July 15th to December 21st of 2013. This is from a colleague, Michael Lane, who's a PhD candidate at Trent University, who's nominee from Wisconsin. He and his partner, Sharon Hetta, who is from New Zealand and is Maori, are going to be on the walk. And you can get information at tlw4rta@gmail.com. The walk is for Indigenous sovereignty, and there's a gathering on December 22nd in San Francisco. Some of the folks who organized the longest walk in 1978 are organizing this one also. And Michael also says that in the organizing of this, that they're also acknowledging the young people who will be arriving in Ottawa, and we spoke about them earlier. So just so you know, the longest walk, TLW, number 4, RTA, all lowercase, @gmail.com, and that's from Michael Lane and Sharon Hetta. So they wanted to be here today, but they can't. They couldn't be. And just in closing, I wanted to say that there are more opportunities like this that we all need to work together to create and break down the barriers and the conflict that might exist in our perceptions or misperceptions or assumptions of one another. So just have to keep the conversation going. We watch.
Thank you. Did you have any thoughts that you wanted to close off with?
Well, all I want to say is good to see all you guys. Let's live. Power to the people.
It's really great to get, but I just want to say thank you very much, especially to the allies, to all the solidarity that has been built over the years for all of the Indigenous cause, all of our struggles. If it wasn't for the supporters the awareness wouldn't be as huge to me, but thank you. And see you all after that creation.
I was wondering, in terms of academic insurgency and getting alternate strategies of Indigenous ideologies into the academy, this is directed towards Barnicke's sister and moderated by Sheelah. You were talking about art, the story of Canada, and as an artist and an academic, I often try to use Indigenous art as a decolonization methodology. So we'll look at CBC stories from Oka, and then we look at the art that came out of Oka, and we did a critical examination of both. But you know, it's, and these places are sites of cognitive imperialism, what Marie Batiste is specifically defining as. But so I'm going to try and do this. While trying to get a job in these colonial structures, while at the same time critiquing these colonial structures, people often advise me to take the word decolonization out of my cover letter because it seems a little bit too adversarial. But then one Mish Prof told me, well, you can't be Mish Prof and not be adversarial, and if you're not being adversarial, you're not doing your job. And so I wonder if you agree, or if there is, what are the other alternate strategies of academic insurgency and getting an Indigenous ideology into the academy?
We like to talk about this as informing academic discourse. It's framed that way to say it needs to inform your paradigm, it needs to inform your framework in the mainstream institution. But at the same time, we're also saying that we're bringing these concepts and these ideas forward because they have been proven to sustain people for generations. They're not second to a framework that emanates from a Euro-Canadian or any other kind of framework. So it's an assertion and a declaration that that's where it's coming from. So in doing that, you're not seeking equal ground or equal coverage. You're actually saying this kind of predates what you're talking about. And we're also saying that this is something that has universal understanding from other Indigenous nations around the world. That people are very enamored with Eastern thought, for example. And so we often say things like, well, you know, this is parallel to many of the philosophical underpinnings of some of your work in the academy. We're saying that a lot of what we talk about and a lot of what we are trying to do in our work is actually coming from an Indigenous place in the Americas, that we're not importing it from somewhere else. And that, in fact, it has sustained us and is part of who we are as peoples. So in lots of ways, we don't introduce it as another way of looking at things, but it is a way of looking at things, it is our way of looking at things, much like other people have other traditions. So it ties into a lot of the Canadian sensibility, or what Canada thinks it is, in that it's supposed to accommodate different points of view. And we're saying that, in fact, if you look at things from an Indigenous framework, the accommodation is already there. You don't have to invent accommodation. It's already included in our worldviews that there's a place for everything and everyone, and the energy belongs to everything and everyone. So we find in lots of ways talking about it that way gets people thinking from their own experience, and it's actually a very freeing concept. And sometimes I think we're pressured into this comparison, you know, compare or contrast. And in fact, sometimes there is no room for comparison or contrast. That it just is, and we just are. So it's basically the way we try to do it. And in terms of being adversarial, if people don't like what you say because it reaches somewhere deep inside of them, or their assumption or their worldview, they call you adversarial. That's their definition for something that they don't like to hear. But you're not adversarial. You're just telling the truth.
treatment center to look at my alcoholism and had me stop and had me share a room with a woman who smudged, and so I smudged. And I was home. I just wanted to encourage you, people, you know, that the eight fire is lit, and that we are coming to you for help because we don't have to walk about this on this planet. And you are the leaders. I know that my life is so rich. I have nothing to show for it on the outside. That is what society says you must have, is have stuff. I have nothing, and my life is so rich because I began my life in 1991 in a treatment center on this red road with you people. And so I just want to encourage you and say that we all are leaders. We all are leaders. We all have a voice. And I believe that this government is playing its role perfectly. It is helping us to wake up, and it's helping us to find that voice inside. Finally. And I was told that Mother Earth is willing to go through this to help us to wake up to who we really are. Who we really are. And anyways, the richness is inside. I went to the UN. I just want to say one more thing. I went to the UN last year, and I was at the Commission on the Status of Women. And so I was able to meet my sisters from across this planet, Indigenous women. They're all going through the same thing, these villages. And we also found out, because the agenda of governments worldwide are moving to the right and becoming more oppressive, our stories are starting to merge. We're starting to. And so I just want to tell this one story about women from South America.
There's two other people waiting at the mic, and we really just have.
It's just that they went to the corporations. Yeah. They went not to the parliament building. Thank you so much. Corporations. And they got their land back.
Right. Thank you very much for your comments. I'm really sorry, we're really so short on time. I'm wondering if what we can do is if we could just take the next two questions, and then we may or may not be able to answer them. If you could just keep your questions really short, because we really want to give enough time for people to have dinner and come back in time for the next panel. No, sorry.
Yeah, she's talking about the De Beers document tomorrow. The third one online, if that's okay.
I really feel like. Okay.
I'll only take a second.
Okay.
Another question. Michelle touched on the rights of people. We all should have clean air, clean water, and the land. And I wonder if everybody knows that on websites of the Davis Foundation and Equijustice, perhaps others, there is a petition. One of them, at least, is going to the Supreme Court. And this one started in Kimberley Valley in southwestern Ontario. A petition, not a petition, but whatever you call it, to include rights for Canadians for clean air, clean water, clean land. And these things have already been done in other countries, but we still don't have that written in our Constitution.
Thank you for your comments.
Bonjour, Justina, this is Minnesota. I have just a quick question around, well, it's not really quick, but I'll condense it. We're talking about Aboriginal rights and coming together and stuff. One of the things that I've been working on for the last 20-odd years is the rights of Aboriginal women. And the rights of Aboriginal women to be free of violence, any form of violence. And I'm just wondering how Adel Moore is going to continue working towards eradicating the violence towards Aboriginal women, and in particular to our sister from Thunder Bay, around the violence towards our communities up there, and how Adel Moore is working to educate the police in how they're dealing with some of the violent actions that's been going on. But
thank you very much for your question.
I'm not sure how to do this. We have 2 minutes. Did you want to answer the last question?
What was it again?
It was a very big question for a 2-minute answer. Maybe we'll have the final announcement and then we'll break for dinner.
Thanks. I just wanted to announce an action that's taking place tomorrow in support of Attawapiskat against the beers. Basically, they blockaded a road in February twice. The court slammed down an injunction saying that they can't blockade for 3 whole years on the whole road from Moosonee to Attawapiskat, even on reserved territory, or they get arrested. And then now De Beers wants to sue the blockaders for $130 million. So they're going to be meeting with the judge and De Beers on Monday. So tomorrow's the action. It's at noon, southeast corner of Dundas and Young. And if anyone has access to a photocopy between now and then, I have some copies of this thing. Well, one thing we're going to be doing is handing this out, especially to people potentially buying diamonds. And if you want to make some extra copies so that we have more to hand out, so far we have a total, we'll be having a total of 1,000 pictures and about $100 without. But come up to me and get a copy. You can make copies and go ahead.
Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everyone's questions, but please join me in thanking this panel for bringing their stories to us today.